I told them 6:45-ish. Figured it'd take us 15 minutes to get through the grants.
Okay. All right. Then do we want to start the recording and get going on that? Because we have a quorum here.
I've got YouTube going and uh, we are good to go.
Okay. Thank you and good evening and welcome to the March 13th BET operating budget review meeting. Before we get started, Madam Clerk, may I ask you to call a roll, please?
Mayor Rilling,
Here.
Mr. Abrams,
Here.
Mr. Camacho,
I'm here.
Mr. Constant, Mr. Gilleret,
Here.
Mr. Cassinis,
Here.
Miss Yang. Here. 6, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. As always, before we get underway tonight, Mr. Mayor, I want to just double check, see if you have any comments you'd like to make to get us started this evening.
No, just what I've said before. It's a challenging process this year, and I thank everybody for their hard work and dedication and trying to put together a budget that's fair and equitable. So thank you.
Okay. So, Tom, do we want to start to jump into the grant requests?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Can we see it?
Yes, sir.
All right. So this first one, and I don't see him on. Let's see.
Tom, could you make that just a bit larger?
Sure. How about that?
There you go.
Good. Okay. I'm going to ask, is Alan Kibbe on the line?
I don't see Alan.
Okay. Hold on, get another. Kendrick is attempting to dial in. He is on his way. But I do believe we have Margaret on the line for fair housing, if it's okay to skip ahead to that one.
Sure.
Margaret, are you there? Margaret, are you there?
Tom, if it helps you, I see as participants tonight, Joe Nicola, Marianne Shepherd, Robert Pennington at the
Yeah,
moment.
I see those are
And Kendrick is here.
I'm gonna make you a co-host, Ed, just in case again.
Okay.
All right. Yes. Okay. All right, I guess we don't have Margaret, but we can start going through these. There's really no significant changes on anything here. The Harbor Commission, that's the first one, is asking for $20,000. They asked for the same amount last year. So zero increase there. Margaret says she is muted. I do not see her on here anywhere. Do you see her?
I do not either. Neither on this side or, well, I see, do you happen to know her phone number?
She just sent it to me, 203-856-8811.
Yeah, she's on as an attendee.
Okay, can you can click on that and promote her to a panelist?
Hang on.
You can hear us.
No, I am not allowed to promote her to a panelist. I can't allow her to speak though. So I'll do that.
You can or can't?
I can allow her to speak.
Okay, yeah, go ahead then. She's on the phone, so.
Okay.
All right.
Margaret, you should be able to speak at this point.
Although you need to unmute, Margaret.
While we're waiting for Margaret, Tom, and to the others.
Hi.
Oh, no, we got
Okay.
her.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Hooray. I'm here. Margaret Seward from Fair Housing.
Okay, Margaret, I have your grant application up on the screen share. You had a total of 178,000 last year and a total of 188,000 this year. Maybe you can just take us through that and explain the variance of looks like about a 6% increase or $10,000 year over year.
Okay, will do. Thank you very much. And sorry for my technical difficulties here. Okay, there's a 3% salary increase, which is a total of $3,602. The 17% increase in fringe benefits. Obviously, I have no control over that. You know, I'm an employee of redevelopment agency, and they give me these numbers for what the fringe will cost. That's $6,306, and payroll taxes will go up by all of $276. So that's a total of $10,184 in personnel costs. And as I said, the bulk of that is in fringe. Otherwise, we asked for just the same as last year. So zero increase at all in operating funds.
Okay. Questions for Margaret?
I was going to make a comment to Tom before about all the grant applications. Sometimes we get in the habit of asking for the same thing year after year after year. If we could just take a look at the accounts, do some sort of just a very cursory audit to make sure that the money's not just sitting there, that it's being spent in the way that it was intended.
Yeah, we did look, Mayor, thank you. We did look at that this year, and I had proposed actually a small reduction, but then this will be the year that the commission needs to advertise and find a new fair housing officer, since I'll be retiring during the course of the year. So the commission decided not to reduce that, just to be sure they have enough money to cover expenses, which we haven't had in 28 years.
That sounds fair.
Okay. Other questions for Margaret relating to the fair housing grant? Okay. I guess move on, Tom.
Okay, yeah, so back up to the top, the first one was the Harbor Commission. I'm not sure if there were any questions on that. 20,000 last year, 20,000 this year. I do not see Alan Kib. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I do not see him on the line. Any questions there? I can certainly take them to him if there are.
Yeah, that was what generated my question earlier. You said 20,000, 20,000, 20,000. I just want to make sure that the money is being used appropriately, not appropriately, but just that it's being used. And rather than sitting there and building up and just get into the habit of giving them $20,000 or any amount for any of the other grant applications on a regular basis without really looking at it.
I think that's a very fair ask across the board, Tom. If we can just get some, as the mayor said, high level view of accounting spend to date to just make sure the dollars are used, as he said.
Okay. All right, we already did.
That'll be a blanket statement for every single one of the grants, I think.
Okay, I actually do not see anybody else on the line yet. Oh, there's Matt Pence, there's one. But anyway, the next one is probate court. So here we are. So this one is actually down slightly. Last year we had 30,985. This year 30,413. I did speak to Diane earlier today. She did indicate that she was not going to be here, but she was happy to field any questions via email, which you can send to me and I can send to her. But at the least, I will pass along the same query that you had mentioned there, Mayor and Ed.
I just have a basic question. Who funds the rest of their operating budget? Is it the state?
Well, Wilton pays their share as well, since we share it with them. And I'm not sure, but I would have to imagine they get some state funding. I don't know if,
I think they're funded by the fees and everything that they charge on on each case and stuff like that. That's part of where they get their funding.
yeah, all their backup is just talking to the 30,000 here and what makes that up, their office supplies and scanners and furniture and such. So
Right. So I assume then maybe it must be the state if he's a judge, must pick up the salaries are picked up by the state.
I think the way it works in the probate court is that they're almost self-funded, and the fees and costs and everything else that they charge per transaction, I mean, it may go to the state, but eventually they are charged with the responsibility to raise money to fund their operation.
If they're able to do that, can we go back and ask them if they can bear their own expenses here? Because these are all office expenses. It's postage, supplies, and other. Perhaps they might be able to bear those costs if they're able to bear the overall costs of the probate court. So if they could take on 100%. It's just something to.
So I think that's a fair ask, if
Okay.
we go back to them, right, and they self-fund it. So leave this particular grant right now as an open item until we get clarification on that.
okay. Good with probate?
Other than that,
Yeah.
I think so. Any other questions on probate?
No.
Okay, the next one is the transit district. And we do have Matt Pence on the line. Matt, you're up. I see that you are on the screen. There you
Yeah,
are.
thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone.
So yeah,
Good evening, Matt.
sorry. I was going to say the normal process is to talk about the variances, but I don't see any variances, but perhaps you could hit some of the highlights and what you're looking to do in the coming year.
Sure, yeah. So we're submitting flat to last year. We have a couple things going on. We have most of our operations are funded by the state. We have a structural deficit that we've been working on fixing on, which mostly impacts our Norwalk ADA program. So the state knows about that. This has been the issue for the last few years. We were able to get some additional funding for Stanford ADA, and they're working with us in fixing the funding issue for Norwalk ADA, but the issue is still there. So we use local money for a few things. Number one, the Norwalk ADA piece. Number two, interest expense. We're usually fronting 2 months of operations each quarter before the state pays, and the state does not reimburse us for interest expense, and also other general and administrative fees. So I think by submitting a flat, it's going to help us. We've had a long-term accumulated debt for about 5 or 6 years, and we're almost done paying that off. So we're going to use a piece of this I'm hoping this is the last year, and we'll have it paid off by next year. We may have $50,000 or $100,000 left next year. I'm not sure, but optimistically we'll have that cleared. But this amount should help us cover the Norwalk ADA shortfall, the interest expense, and help us progress in chipping away at that long-term debt. So I'm hoping next year we'll be debt free, and we always, as usual, appreciate the city's support. And just so you know, we've been working on applying for grants and other funding sources to lower the local burden, which I think for many transit districts, that's the way it should work. But we do appreciate the city helping us through these challenges.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Great.
Matt, I'm not sure you were on when the mayor made this as an opening remark, but it's a fair one. You know, you're asking for flat year to year. Where are you on the spend against this year's grant number? You know, have we actually utilized all $660,000? Are we on pace to do that? Can you talk a little bit about where you are with actual utilization?
Yeah, so we will spend it all. It's tricky, right? I mean, one of the things that's working against us is the interest rates. We all know that interest rates are, I think we're paying prime plus a quarter, which is a little over 8%. But again, we use every last dollar of it because of the longstanding debt that we've had. At one point, it was $3.3 million. At the end of last year, sorry, I'm just looking at our records here. It was, I think it was 935,000. So you guys give us the 661, right? We pay what we need to cover the Norwalk shortfall. We pay our interest, and what's left, we pay down that outstanding debt. So we will use every last dollar of this to pay the long-term debt. And I think at the end of this upcoming year, we'll either be flat or have 50,000 left. So yeah, there's nothing left on the table there.
I had a quick question. Did you say you front the money, and then there's an interest expense that the state then covers? Did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correct. Yeah, Norwalk and every other transit district. We have state operating agreements, and they're funded quarterly, right? And so we submit our invoices. So July 1st, for example, is when the fiscal year starts. We don't see that payment until usually the end of August, early September. So we're always fronting 2 months of operation. So that's an issue, and the Department of Transportation knows about it. Hoping that they can fix that. There is some new personnel up there, and I'm seeing some of the financial processes being improved. They know there's an issue with paying timely, but yeah, we're constantly floating 2 months of operating expenses.
Yeah, because it seems like
And
you're
again,
being...
just to chime in too, they don't reimburse for interest, so it's a structural flaw in how things work here.
Okay.
And
This-
to that point, I mean, if you want to think years ahead, I mean, I think part of our goals here is to have a little bit of a reserve. 5 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, we have a little bit of a reserve so that we don't have to borrow to front those 2 months. We can just pay for it with our own reserve and operate from there. But I think we're about 2 or 3 years away from that, depending on the local support.
Additional questions for Matt?
Yes.
Ann?
Okay, of the 660 budget, how much of that is for the shortfall on the ADA transportation in Norwalk?
Yeah, so good question. So last year, 478 would have been. We were fortunate to apply for a grant that covered a good portion of that, which allowed us to pay more of the debt back. But this year, the way it's trending through January, it's 463. And again, we're constantly looking for other funding sources to cover that, but long term, that's not sustainable. So yeah, the majority of it is for that Norwalk ADA.
Is it about equivalent to Stanford?
It is not. Stanford was actually larger. What happened with Stanford is that they cut our funding almost 41% when COVID hit, when there was a lot less transportation. I was kind of back and forth pleading for this money back, and we didn't get it, right? But recently they did restore it, and they gave us a 5% increase for Stanford. So the Stanford funding is just about fixed. We have a little bit of a deficit there. We were on a call just yesterday saying we're getting new agreements. So I do think that the Stanford funding is going to be fixed. I don't think Norwalk's going to be fixed just yet, but it's part of a larger discussion that the Department of Transportation is committed to helping us fix. It has not been an easy process. So Norwalk ADA is definitely in a worse position than Stanford ADA.
Okay. The working capital expense, which is floating your expenses, it's the timing difference between your receivable and your payable.
Mm-hmm.
What is typically the balance that you have to draw?
It's about $2.4 million.
Okay. So 2.4 million. So your interest expense on that is, call it $150,000.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Um, and then the rest is, so just fundamentally, is it really the city's, if you're a state-run organization, is it the city's responsibility to be paying off the debt on the North Transit District?
I would say no. I mean, first off, there should be no structural deficit in funding, and that's something we're working on. With regards to the interest, I think every transit district would agree it should not be the city's responsibility. And that's just an issue that we're working through with the department. It's just, it's been a long struggle trying to get that fixed.
So theoretically, if you're able to get that fixed, plus get the funding for the Norwalk ADA, this 660 should go to zero.
Theoretically, mostly. So there's in our budget, there's non-reimbursable expenses that help with just general and administrative and employee morale stuff. So I wouldn't give it all up, but I think in a perfect world, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, we have a reserve. We won't need funding from the city for Norwalk ADA. And we won't need it for interest expense. So maybe, $50,000 would be reasonable. But again, this has been a long fight, a long battle to get these funding things restored. But your thinking is correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, theoretically, the state should be able to provide you with one, they should be able to pay you faster. Because the rate of them to borrow is cheaper than each individual district, which you probably just use a regular bank.
Mm-hmm.
And the ADA should be covered. And I would say if we could excise of the 660 what you were budgeting for your debt amortization and take that out, I think that would be helpful, because I think that's the responsibility of your organization to generate the income either from the ridership and from the state to be paying down your debt, not the city of Norwalk.
Right. Well, yes, I agree mostly. I mean, the debt, if we were to close tomorrow, the debt falls on the city. So, it's our job to fix that. We've made a lot of good progress with this funding. But yeah, we're not far away from being in a situation where we will have no debt.
Right.
But yes, if all things work, for example, our fiscal year starts July 1st, and I've been here for 6 years. And in most cases, we get our operating agreement in September, right? So we can't even get a dollar from them until we get our contract. There's a lag there, right? But there is a new administrator, Lisa Rivers, and she's great, and Ben Limmer's the new bureau chief there, and they are all onto this, right? And they're helping to fix it, but I guess it takes time, but I'm optimistic, and they've been very good partners of ours. But hopefully in a couple of years, the picture's a bit different, and we're getting our budget and our operating agreement before the fiscal year starts, and we can get that funding, and a lot of these issues don't exist.
You're And is there anything more germane to approval this year?
Yeah, there is. So of the 935 of debt you have outstanding, is there a fixed amortization schedule?
No, it's just long-term accumulated debt that's on a line of credit. So we don't have an amortization schedule on that.
So if it's 460, if it's called 460 for the Stanford ADA and 150 for the interest expense, we get to 600. So could we move your grant from being 660 to 600?
Let me just bear with me. So you're saying how much for Stanford, 460 for Norwalk, and how much for interest are you assuming?
Well, you told me 150 for interest, 460 for the Stanford, the ADA. So that gets 600. So I think that you don't need the full 660, because I don't think we should be responsible for amortizing your debt.
Just bear with me 1 second. I'm not following your math. So start again, please?
So the ADA, four
Mhm.
six,
Right. Oh, that's.
and
Got it.
and the interest expense, which is the interest expense on your working capital, is like 150,
Right, so that's 610.
610. So right now you're at 660. Can we have six? Can we
I
have
would,
your
I would ask for about 40,000 more, just for non-reimbursable expenses that the state wouldn't pay. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, 45 would be nice. These are just employee morale and some additional training initiatives that the state will question that we use this local money for. So I mean, that's 655. I mean, if you want to settle on 650, I'll make it happen. Is that fair?
No, I understand what you're saying, but we're in a very difficult year where there are people whose property taxes on average may go up $3,600.
Yeah.
If there are expenses which the state wouldn't cover, then theoretically we shouldn't be covering them either. So
I understand. I don't want to set the district back. Like I said, if our doors close tomorrow, the debt falls on you guys, right? And so it's just a matter of when you want to.
I understand. So and Abrams, if we could maybe leave this as an open item.
Yeah, I mean,
I think,
we'll have to
Matt,
settle. Go ahead,
let me
sorry.
jump in just for a minute, Matt. I think the question here is the difference between 610 and 660. 610 is a must-have. Got that with you, right? But as the mayor has said to every department, and we've said to every department, there's a difference between must-haves and nice-to-haves.
Mhm.
The question on that $50,000 is understanding morale, understanding all those other things.
Mhm.
Is it a nice-to-have versus a must-have? And can we settle on 610 as a number in a very tight budget year to help the taxpayers of the city? It's that simple. Understand you have training you'd like to do, morale things you'd like to do, but we've got to consider the morale of the entire city as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I'm a resident as well. And one of the reasons I didn't want to ask for more is because I understand the squeeze on taxpayers. Can we settle on 625?
I think we should just leave it as an open item.
Well, let's look at 625, but we'll leave it as an open item. Doesn't mean you're not going to get anything here, Matt. We'll just discuss it when we do our final deliberations.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm trying to work with you, and believe me, we're working hard
No, I appreciate it.
to try and fix the Norwalk ADA funding gap. I mean, I would agree that that's the big part of the issue here, and I don't think it should fall on local taxpayers. But fair enough. You know, a good discussion, and as always, appreciate you guys.
And appreciate your flexibility and your candor in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
All right, Tom,
we're gonna bounce back up to Harbor Commission because I see Alan on the line now. So Alan, your request in 2024 was 20,000. This year it is also 20,000. If you'd like to cover any of the highlights or what's on tap.
Sure. I apologize for being late. I was sitting watching a little daisy bill go around on another address for this meeting, so I'm waiting for the host to start it. So I'm sorry I wasn't here at the top of the show. Harbor Commission, we work closely with the Shellfish Commission, Recreation Parks, the Mayor's Water Quality Commission, and the Health Department. Our major expenses, personnel-wise, is the Norwalk Harbor Master, Mr. Bruce Lavallo, who we pay a contracted $12,000 stipend to at this time. We put a little extra in this year to raise that because the Walk Bridge project is really increasing the demands on his time extensively. And we've also added a second assistant harbor master because of the Walk Bridge activity. It just demands a lot of time on the water between our harbor master and the Marine Police. Escorting barges through the narrow construction area under the bridge and so forth. So that's the reason for the increase there. The other major employee expense really is we have a planning consultant generally runs around $20,000 to $25,000 a year in reimbursements. He's Jeffrey Stedman. He's a really an expert on maritime projects and law, and assists us a great deal with all kinds of projects, and particularly with dealing with DEEP issues. He's very experienced in that. Our so those are our major go outs. What we support are the with our funds, as well as the water quality interns. Historically, it's a project that is really funded by the health department, so their money comes through the Harbor Commission. They do things like paint this manhole covers with indication that these manholes lead to the Long Island Sound and things like that. And they work out on the Norwalk Islands doing remediation projects and working with the camping areas on the Norwalk Islands and things of that nature. We support the Harbor Master vessel. We have a boat that the Harbor Master drives around in, which we maintain, and we share that with the Marine Police on occasion when they need a vessel of that size. And we manage all of the moorings in the Norwalk Harbor, which are the private club moorings at Spite Island Yacht Club and Rowayton Boat Club and Norwalk Yacht Club. Those are all moorings in the water, which we have to look after and take care of the paperwork and assisted with them. One thing that we're working on now, I think it's kind of exciting, is we're increasing our transit moorings in the harbor, which is adding a little bit of expense because of some of the services we use to manage those. The moorings that are used by the same people all season are managed by one service called Online Mooring. But we've started with our transit moorings using another mooring services, which is really much more geared toward transient boaters who might like to visit Norwalk. So that site includes pictures of Norwalk and things you can do in Norwalk, and has a promotional component to it. The goal is to get more people coming to Norwalk by boat to take part in all we have to offer, and that's extensive now with East Norwalk, South Norwalk, the Maritime Aquarium, the Children's Museum. All of that is something we are trying to encourage out of towners to come and stay for a night or two and partake of Sono and see some of the sites. So we've used a new site that's more appropriate for that, which is called DocWa. It's again, it's just a website, but it really has a lot of promotional features which benefit the city, as well as getting the kind of people we'd like to have coming to Norwalk by boat, get them here. So that's the mooring setup, and those are most of our major expense areas. The revenue comes from our city grant, which we're requesting, which is $20,000. Our mooring permits that we get by for our resident moorings, people that are there all summer with their mooring, it's close to $50,000. This year we had $7,500 of transient moorings, which we really got started very late with that last summer. So we're expecting going forward to have a lot more traffic there, a lot more people coming to Norwalk by boat, tying up out in the harbor, and they dinghy ashore. There are facilities for transient dinghies at the Donovan Boating Center right there near South Norwalk, where they can tie up for the evening. They can go to dinner, they can go to the mall, they can go to the Maritime Aquarium. You can spend the afternoon with the kids at the aquarium or the Children's Museum there. So there's a plan there to increase the tourist visits to Norwalk via the Harbor Management Commission. Other revenue we get besides moorings and the city are really we get grants from the Shellfish Commission of $2,000 or $3,000, and the same from the Health Department. The Health Department is primarily for the water quality interns I mentioned at the beginning, who's an expense item, and that sort of washes out. And then the Shellfish Commission has use of the Harbor Commission's vessel, so they give us a grant of $2,000 or $3,000 a year to for that purpose. Questions, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
Alan, if I may, what are total revenues for the Water Commission? And what I'm trying to understand is what percent of total revenues does the 20,000 you get in this grant make up?
Well, our overall budget's about $80,000, so it's roughly a quarter.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody's screen is on the main screen.
Tom, you're sharing email screens.
All
Sorry.
right, better? Yep, there we go.
Nope, you still got another one.
Better?
Nope,
I'm
there
sorry,
it's gone now.
Okay.
what was
Go ahead, Alan.
the revenues from the moorings?
Me? We had both for our moorings that are really resident moorings for people in Norwalk, or take the mooring for put a mooring in for the whole summer, is $47,000. This year we had $7,500 from transient moorings, and this year we're adding, I think, 6 new transit moorings to the 2 we had last season. So we expect a significant increase in the visitations to Norwalk, where people can again tie up, not at the visitor's dock, but on it's like an anchor. It's just you're floating out in the middle of the water rather than being tied to a dock.
Mhm.
How many moorings do you have, and what's the annual fee?
The annual fee is $5 a foot for a seasonal moored vessel. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I can tell you, if you divide $47,000 by 5, that would give you the number of boat feet that we have moored. That would be Spite Island Yacht Club, Norwalk Yacht Club, Rowayton Boating Facility, and our season-long moorings in Norwalk Harbor.
So here's a question in going in using usage fees. Would it be outlandish to charge $7 a foot, and therefore you don't need our $20,000 grant?
I think you'll see a pickup in the transit moorings, for one thing, which will help with that. And the other is that we just increased the mooring fee by fixing it at $5 a foot. We used to have a sliding scale of $2, $3, and $5 a foot, and we just said this is silly. Rather than basing it on the length of the boat, they all take about the same space. So we've gone to and just publishing a new fee schedule for the moorings. The other thing that we're just working on now with the legal department is changing the mooring regulations that are codified in our statutes, that where the fee is part of the statute. We're moving toward a separate fee schedule for all the mooring related items, so that we can have less of a difficulty changing a fee, because it's difficult now. That requires more than just changing a fee schedule. It requires changing a statute.
Right. So
And how
conceivably,
quickly could you change that statute?
Pardon me?
How quickly could we change statutes? What I'm trying to assess here, Alan, and we're talking only about a total of $20,000, is to what Ann's getting to, right? Could we get you to the point this coming fiscal year, through increased mooring rates, that would make you cost neutral and not need $20,000 from the city? Is it feasible to actually get that done between now and the start of the fiscal year?
I don't know that it is. Again, I don't know how long I just saw a draft of the proposed statute changing this week, I guess. It just came through that I'd seen, and the new fee schedule, which was approved by, I believe, the ordinance committee. So we're started with that. But
Okay,
the
here's
increase in
what
fee, I
I'd
don't
like-
think will. Yeah.
Here's what I'd
Other
like
thing,
to propose. I would like to propose that we leave this as an open item. Alan, you take the next couple of days, come back to us, find out if it is even possible to increase mooring fees this year. And if an increase in mooring fees to get you an additional $20,000 in revenue would be cost competitive, I'll call it, or detrimental to the city. If you could just answer those three questions for us before we get to our final deliberations, I think we can move on here. Is that fair?
when would you like that?
Tom, our
Yeah,
final deliberation.
we're doing the deliberation on the open items on Monday night at 6:30.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'd need something prior to that. All right, let's move on, please.
Yeah, so the final grant item is the redevelopment agency. That is Brian Bedoli, but I don't see him here.
I'm here right now.
Oh,
Sorry, I think I'm
yes,
under
sir.
someone's different name.
Oh, yeah, you're listed as me. That's why. Okay.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, I didn't get the invite till today, so I apologize. I'm on audio.
No, that's fine. So 500,000 last year, 500,000 this year. Take it away, Brian.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And I know we had a chance to speak last year, so apologies if this is redundant at all. But obviously at the redevelopment agency, we're responsible for a number of things, working on behalf of the city, managing a number of capital grants, negotiating real estate transactions, really focus on revenue generation for the city in a number of ways. The first one, as I just mentioned, we're administering close to $30 million of grants for the city. The grants are great. Everyone wants us to get grants, but a lot of them are capital grants and they don't permit operating revenues to actually do the work associated with those grants. So with the $500,000 that were provided, you're providing assistance for us to manage those grants on behalf of the city, in addition to conducting a number of planning studies that we work on and negotiate real estate transactions such as the disposition of the 30 Monroe Street parking lot, which is a sale, and proceeds go directly to the city. We don't charge any administrative fees on top of that. And the 500,000 represents a small part of our total $1.9 million budget. In years past, if you recall, last year we were able to kind of make up the gap with deferred revenues from sale of old properties. That is no longer the case. That money's been exhausted. So we've been working with the city to identify a sustainable path forward so we don't lose out on all these opportunities to bring you guys new revenue. And that's the tune of 500,000. As I mentioned, it'll be 1.9 million in our overall budget, and we're contributing the remainder and still gap financing to a similar number. So happy to answer any questions that you have, and look forward to the conversation.
Any questions for Brian?
Yeah, one question. So I remember as of 2024, the 500K was a new expense, like you mentioned, to fill in for deferred revenue. Has there been any efforts to look for other sources of revenue versus relying on the city for grant money?
Constantly. And we have a team of 3 grant writers that push for this. But again, as I said, most of the money that's available for these sort of things is capital money. So we've been able to kind of help, which is sort of the other third of our budget, is those little fees that we get. For instance, if we look at the community challenge grant, it's prohibited from us putting any money into operations and admin. So we're basically, bringing $6 million of capital funds for the city's infrastructure, and we have $0 that we're able to pull from that. And if we are able, it's usually in the 5 to 10% range. So we push, but in terms of the type of funds that we're able to attract, it's very challenging to get other people, because they look at the contributions like this as sort of your skin in the game to get the access to these capital resources.
Okay. What was the
I do have to
deferred
say,
revenue?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. Sorry, it's breaking up for me. What was that?
Yeah, I was just asking the sale.
couldn't
What
hear.
was
I'm
that
sorry. What was
from
that?
the first time? The deferred revenue that you had initially,
You said-
what was that generated from?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I wasn't involved in that personally. That was well before my time, but there was a HUD grant that actually was involved in the redevelopment of Washington Street. So that actually ended up including those resources, and they did grew since about 1960s, 1970s, I believe, and that interest kind of carried us forward through those years.
Gotcha.
Mr. Mayor, I
Okay.
believe you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I was going to say the redevelopment agency in the city of Norwalk, we have a wonderful partnership, and this money comes back 2 and 3 times. Brian has been very, very generous in working with us on projects that we couldn't normally fund on our own. Sometimes we just simply have to ask, and he's right there for us. So I just wanted to say that about this request.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any additional questions for Brian? All right, Brian, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, the rest of the meeting will be the Board of Education. So any of the folks that were here for their grants, you're welcome to drop. There is no vote tonight. So without further ado, sorry, Ann, you have your hand raised?
I do. Is Margaret Sweep still on the line, or has she left?
Yes, she is actually.
Margaret, when is it that you are planning to retire?
She may need to be
Elevated.
taken off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you,
Yep.
Mark.
Okay. I'm planning on retiring in January of 2025.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So for the group, I'd like to put that item, that grant, onto the open items list, because conceivably we would just need to fund until Margaret retires.
Oh, I'm still here. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. The only concern I would have with that is there's a court order requiring this position. So the intention is to have it filled, to have some kind of seamless transition.
Understood, but maybe there's.
We can leave it on the open item list. That's fine.
Court orders.
Okay, just wanted you to be aware.
No, appreciate that, Margaret, and fully understand that the intention is to have it, and it is required to be filled. It's just something we can discuss in our final deliberations.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for your time tonight.
No, thank you, and thanks for hanging in there.
Yep. Good night.
All right, Tom. Good night. Tom, shall we turn it over to the Board of Education?
Yeah, so I see they have a number of their team, including Dr. Estrella and Lunda Ismani. If either one of you want to take it away from here, you are welcome to do so.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the members of the BET, Mayor Harry Reeling, and members of the community. Mr. Asmani, do you want to put forward just the cover of our presentation tonight? Thank you. So I would like to start off our conversation today by first highlighting some of the great work that has been happening across Norwalk Public Schools. We actually have a lot to celebrate, and a lot of that is thanks to the immense support and contribution that our city has put forward in our schools. And we're hoping that tonight we can have a productive conversation that will lead to the continuation of us being able to do the great work for the children of Norwalk. We've had great successes from having students achieve a number of awards, one of which recently one of our students received the Norwalk Commission on the Status of Women Impact Award. We had students receive awards across the nation through the National Association of Bilingual Education. Ponis Ridge Middle School received the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow Award. They were actually finalists. Our Gifted and Talented program participated in the History Day competition, and we had first, second, third, and 2 honorable mention winners across the district. As you know, we have a very robust band program across Norwalk Public Schools. Thank you, Mayor Railing, for your support in making sure that our scholars had the tools they needed to do their work well. And as you know, we have won numerous awards in this area. I also want to highlight that our community really values the way in which we have our students immersed in rigorous curricula. And as you probably know, we have expanded the International Baccalaureate program from elementary school through high school. And recently, Brian McMahon participated in a 5-year review in which they were noted to show exemplary practices that are commendable, not only within our state, but across the nation. We, despite some of the national statistics, have lowered our suspension rate within our district, and we have shown significant gains in our graduation rate. For a number of years, our graduation rate was on a decline, and for the first time, 2 years in a row, our graduation rate has increased and maintained at 91%. And this work cannot be done without the amazing work that our educators across our district engage in. And their work is so notable that they have been invited to present at a number of conferences across the country, one of which is the League of Innovative Leaders, the National Association of Bilingual Educators. They have also engaged in peer-to-peer support where teachers are providing professional development for other peers within the district, a way in which, one, we honor the experience within our district and also celebrate the mastery that has been achieved through our efforts. In the opening of the school year, we had the immense opportunity of opening our new Cranberry Elementary School, something that brought a lot of joy and a time to celebrate. And as you know, we are about to break ground to start the building of the new Norwalk High School P-Tech campus. And we are going to make history in the building of the new South Norwalk Elementary School. South Norwalk being a place that for a few decades now has not had the opportunity to have a school that they can call their home, or a school that is a community school within their home. So we're really excited about the work that's happening. I also want to highlight some other accomplishments, particularly as we further immerse ourselves at looking at AI and how AI influences our work. We were pioneers in bringing forward to Connecticut the first AI conference where we had people across the state talking about how to effectively implement AI in the classroom. And we're looking forward to continuing to enhance our practices to better effectively support the needs of our students within that work. We continue to have a future-ready focus, and in that focus, we have made immense strides, particularly in servicing scholars that otherwise would not have had an opportunity to graduate high school. Just January alone, we had 5 graduates, and we're looking forward to 30 additional graduates in June that will be graduating, and in other circumstances would not have if these programs would not be in place. I highlight all of these wonderful things that are happening in Norwalk as we start engaging in this important conversation around our budget, because it's important to see where the value of the community investment goes. And obviously, our most important asset is our students, because our children will be the future of Norwalk. And we want to make sure that we well equip them so that they can successfully lead this city in the near future. As we immerse ourselves in the conversation around the budget, one of the things that we did that was really important to us was engage a number of constituents across our community. We had a number of community meetings We had our first town hall focused around the budget. We also had meetings with our SGC PTA leadership. That was quite well attended, and it afforded us an opportunity to gather feedback from across the district to get a sense around what were the community members' priorities, what did they want to see within our schools, and what were their expectations around the budget process. I've been actually meeting with all of the school governance teams across the district on a monthly basis to get a sense from them individually what they want us to prioritize. And from these conversations, we were able to highlight and elevate some priorities, one of which, for instance, when we were talking about the lockers throughout the budget process, this came out of some of these conversations from the community. And also in the need for having additional planning time for our educators, because we want to make sure that they have the tools necessary and the time to do the work to effectively serve our scholars. We also have a student leadership council that we engage on a quarterly basis. And we also engage our scholars in this important conversation because we want to understand from them, because they are the consumers of the work that we put in place, what is working for them, what could we do better, and how could we, through the budget process, inform the things that we need to elevate and prioritize. And with all this information, we were able to compile the budget that we will be further presenting to you today. And we hope that we can continue to elevate the importance of the work we do, because what we do will set the path for the future of Norwalk, because our children are our future. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Mr. Asmani, who will speak in greater depth in terms of the different elements that are part of our budget and help shape what the needs that we presently have, so that we can continue to do the important work that we do for the students.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. Good evening, members of the BET. It's great to be with you this evening. I just want to confirm, first of all, with a thumbs up, Ed, can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you. We have a presentation for you. I will share, I believe it was last week, once the Common Council tossed this next part of the process to the BET. I did reach out to Mr. Abrams and said, in preparation for this meeting, we have some things that we would like to share, but are there things that the BET would like to hear from us in relation to our budget? And I did incorporate those items throughout the presentation. So as I go through it, I will make reference to the items that you raised, but they are part of this presentation. And I hope that we can further discuss if there's additional elaboration needed. I'd be more than happy to share those with you. But thank you for responding to that.
Thank you. And those comments, Linda, just so you're aware, were not just mine. They were from various members of the BET that we consolidated. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that work for us. So obviously, as the superintendent mentioned, we are guided by our 5 strategic priorities: future readiness, equity, excellence, engagement, and high quality instruction. Everything that we do and prioritize ties to these elements. The district has 6 primary goals: strengthen student success plans, our business and operations in consultation with finance to develop our facilities plan. You've heard the superintendent mention some of the schools that we opened this year and some of the groundbreakings we're having moving forward, but that's all part of our strategic plan, and we would not be able to do that without the collaboration of our city partners. We also look at, in terms of supporting our staff, HR and finance, to just streamline our processes so that we are able to effectively support our educators, to provide instructional leadership, to refine our programming to meet the demands. You heard about artificial intelligence. The word of education is ever evolving, and so we strive to be ahead. And so our budget would reflect our intended response to these changes. And obviously, we want to ensure that all families are provided equitable opportunities to access district resources, and that all our students are adequately educated. So our budget process is similar to what you have on the city side. It's a cycle. We right now are in this step number 5, where our budget, after initial conversations in-house, is incorporated in part of the city budget process. And then at the same time, we also begin our student-based budgets, where we sit down with all of our school administrators and review the budget together. At some point, you will approve a budget and we will get a final number, and then we will begin the process of reconciling the request to what has been appropriated within the process. As far as information regarding our budget, you will recall that in January, you received a rather detailed budget book from us. It's a 90-page document. Included in that is the message. Speaking of our priorities, we talk about our highlights and overviews. We highlight significant changes from prior years. We provide line item information with 5-year history. We talk about the factors that are influencing this budget. We talk about the assumptions that went into building this budget. We also provide you some historical information so you have context to the request. So we have a 5-year history at line item level of the general fund. We do the same for the grants and our school lunch fund. And then we also provide you some information on academic achievements, enrollment, projections, and there was a question about staffing detail that's included. So most of what, and I bring this up because most of what I will share today is lifted from the document that you've had since January. And I would just like to spend some time to elaborate on some of those things. So beginning by who we are in terms of our demographics, we have about 52% of our student population currently, this is as of March 1, are on non-free and reduced lunches, with about 48 on free and reduced. About 22% of our student body are multilingual learners, and about 16% of our student population requires specialized education services. And so these are some of the things that drive the needs within the district. And I think oftentimes we talk about how our population, our student enrollment population, does not drastically change over the years that you see above in front of you. But what does change is the mix and the needs of those students. And so that is something that we looked in conjunction with. So right now we are at about, our last March 1 census, we have about 11,700 students. Our demographic projections are that we will have 11,400 for next year. We typically have a January, February spike in enrollment, and then it drops down during the summer month around October. So that's why you see that discrepancy. So we've actually gone back and compared the March enrollment and October 1 enrollment, which is the official enrollment count. And that is the trend that is the case for the past 4 or 5 years. So now jumping into our multilingual learners and our specialized learning, you see this chart, which kind of shows, is there a question?
Yeah, is it all right if I interrupt for a second?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, I was away last week. I didn't get a chance to put questions together for you.
Sure.
I just have a question on the enrollment. On the superintendent's original budget, it had an enrollment projection of 11,917. Why? So just curious at why the discrepancy of about 500.
Sure, that's actually a great question. So you'll notice that when we presented, we used that 11,900 number presentation back in, I believe it was at the December meeting.
Yes.
In the book that you have, you actually have the updated number. And that was something we went back with a demographer and reviewed it. There was an updated demographic census count that he did. And so you're actually correct. The initial number was 11,900, and then when we saw it, he reviewed it and he updated. And we will probably get another final update probably around April or so, which will take into account what he's seeing with the March spike.
Thank you.
You're welcome. For this slide, I have my colleague, Mr. Assistant Superintendent Pennington. I will kind of speak to the MLO rate and trends over time together with the specialized education and prevalence rate. Rob?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So
I'm going to start with the MLL rate, and I think it's important. There's different components in this chart. The first is the MLL enrollment, which is the orange bar, which we are currently, as of March 1, 2,610 students. And you can see over time that number has gone up. Our overall percentage of multilingual learners is at 22%, and that's the blue percentage that you see going up. One area that I think it's important to highlight is what the state MLL rate is, and that is at 10.1%. And so we are more than double, and that number is continuing on the rise. If I were to compare the start of the school year until today, we have had an increase of 413 multilingual learners. So just to give you from September 1 until March 1. So it is we have influx students coming in. We had an influx in December, and then January, February, and March as well. So I just want that rate has gone up over the last couple of years. If I were to go 2 years ago, we were around 20%. We went up to 21% last year, and we are currently at 22%. Now, the second chart is the special education prevalence rate and the increase there. You can see that we are currently as of March 1, at 1,900 students that are receiving specialized services. And that is an increase of 122 students from the beginning of the year. As an organization, we put in SRBI, which is scientifically research-based interventions, which has really helped us to better identify students earlier to meet their needs. And that has created an increase. We are currently at 16.4%. Last year, the state's prevalence rate was at 17.1, so we are less than the state in terms of their prevalence rate, but we are seeing an increase in students receiving services. And I think going back to Mr. Asmani's point is, as you see, our overall numbers remain somewhat flat, we are seeing an increase in the needs of our students. And so this is another chart that just shows the increase of students who are receiving multilingual learning services and the students who are receiving specialized learning services.
Thank you, Mr. Pennington. With that kind of sharing of who we are and who we represent, I'm going to dive into the numbers, which I think is what most of you are interested in. But we wanted to give you some context to the students we serve. Here we go. So when we look at our overall budget, and this is our tentative approved by the Board of Ed, our budget is divided into 3 broad buckets. Obviously, we have the general fund, which is about 85% of our budget. This is what is supported by property taxes of the citizens of Norwalk. We do have a portion of our budget that is grant funded, about $36.8 million, which represents about 13% of our overall budget. And then we also have a school lunch program, which accounts for about 7.1%, funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that provides meals to our students within the schools. And so we share this to provide a holistic picture. I believe this was feedback from a couple of years ago when the board presented their budget, that the focus was just on the general fund and we weren't focusing on the full picture. So this is our attempt to kind of address that. So in total, it's a $289.1 million budget that you have in front of you. So I'll start with the grant fund. I'll go into the lunch fund, and then I'll get into the general fund, which is supported by property taxes. But before I go there, are there any questions before I proceed?
I have a quick question.
Yes,
Marty?
please.
In addition, do you have any of the numbers for like school rental fees and preschool tuitions and payments as well? Because I think you get money from that as well, don't you? And some tuition from outside districts?
I'll let Rob respond to tuition from outside districts. We do have a program, our early childcare program, that has some revenue that comes in, which offset the operations, and that's included in part of the grant budget and not on the local budget. But it is supported by fees that come in, not 100%, but there are fees that come in that offset the expenses on the grant side, yes.
And you have that broken up in your presentation?
It's not in this presentation, but I can provide that for you. I can
Okay.
gather that information and send it over.
Okay.
And can I respond to the rental fees?
Yep.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we do have a minimal rental fees that we charge outside agencies, but again, it just supports like the security and the custodians for that. It's not for profit, so we don't actually, it pays for itself. It only pays for the actual personnel that have to be in the facility when those activities are taking place.
Do you have those numbers listed anywhere?
No, but we could get those also.
Yeah. Okay. Just
Yeah.
curious.
Of course.
Thank you.
And then in terms of students from outside districts, we do have a couple of students that are, say, at CGS or in our 18 to 22 program, but it is very minimal.
Yeah, I'm sure all these numbers are minimal, so I thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Linda, this is Troy Gillerit. Real quick question.
Hey, Troy.
How are you? Regarding the free and reduced lunch program, when I was reading through the booklet, the summary booklet, it says you show 50%, about 50-50 are non qualified for free and 52% are non-free. But then I read something in the book says that the city of Norwalk has decided where all children eat for free, regardless of their ability to pay. Is that the case? Is that our decision in the town or what?
Yes, that's a great question. And I believe 2 slides from the slide I'm on, Deputy Superintendent Ferreros will speak to that program. It's the community eligibility program, and she will speak to that and how we arrived at that decision and how the math works with that program. But we will be addressing that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But to just so that it's fresh in your mind, so the slide that we showed to start, it's really to show that there are families that the state terms them free or reduced lunch, and it means these are families that also qualify for Husky food assistance like SNAP or housing. So these are families that receive some sort of assistance from the state other than the school. So about half of the demographics in our schools, or the families that attend our schools, receive other assistance from the state. And the state gathers that information because that is a high risk group. So they end up tracking the information on how many students within the district receive other sort of social services. So that just shows us who is it that we have before us. We have half of our families do not require additional assistance, and half of them do. And it comes in various forms, like I said, like SNAP or Husky. But the 100% eating for free, I will address a little bit later.
Thank
To
you.
show you how that impacts the budget. Okay.
Any other questions? I'll proceed. So looking at the grant budget, which is about 13% of the budget, these are the major categories in terms of salaries, benefits, and so forth. So I have information in here that's by object. And then this is the same information shared by the major grants. And this kind of gives you some context into the various types of grants that we receive throughout. There is also line item detail of the grants. And at this point, Deputy Ferreros, who oversees the grants, will provide some context to the grant process, how we apply for grants, and some restrictions related to grants.
So a major celebration that I would like to highlight is actually our ability to successfully secure grants. So $37 million in grants have been secured, and many of them are competitive grants. And these grants do make up about 13% of our operating budget. And just so that you know that with grants, you are limited in what the grant actually funds. So the grants typically have many, many stipulations. So you can't supplant, which means you cannot remove staff that you have in your regular operating budget and then put them into a grant. They're usually for some sort of an enhancement, like we have a marine science grant that is $1.3 million. And that is just for that program and for the enrichment within that. And then more recently, we were actually chosen by the federal government for a magnet schools assistance program grant, and it was $15 million. And that was a really big deal. Senator Blumenthal was here, the mayor joined us, Senator Duff joined us. And this is to allow us additional funding for Kendall, for Ponus Ridge, and for our P-TECH program. So again, it's a $15 million grant, but it comes with many stipulations, and you could only use that funding to support programs at those 3 schools. But I did want to mention that our grant, we are very competitive in seeking our grants, and we're able to actually secure many grants. So if they come out, we do go after them.
So Sandra, just
Yes,
a question of clarification and then one other follow-up
of
question.
course.
The $15 million magnet school assistance grant, again, we've seen it, it's wonderful, it's fantastic news, congratulations
Thank
to
you.
everybody who worked on it. Is that grant over a significant period of years? Why do I
Yeah.
only see 2.9 of that in 2024, 25?
It is. It's over 5 years.
Okay, and it's spread equally over the 5 years? I'm not quick enough to do that
No, it
math.
actually,
15
no,
divided by
it's
5.
not. No, you're
It's
doing the
spread
math.
up. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we put together a 5-year plan and a 5-year
Yeah.
budget. It is spread out, not quite equally, but just about $3 million for a 5-year period. And then whatever you don't use, like for example, we got it mid-school year this year. So whatever we don't use this year will roll over into next year. So for example, that 2.9 that you see there for next year will probably be a little bit more because we have some unexpended funds from this year that will roll into next year. But we do have a 5-year period to complete.
Okay, thank you. Then my second question would be, while this is an impressive list of grants we have received and it's significant amount of money, are there grant applications outstanding that we're still waiting to hear on that may increase the revenue? And do we know by approximately how much?
So we have currently the biggest grant that we have is we actually did it in, it's for the operating side and it's for capital. So it wouldn't impact our general fund. And that's the one that we did in collaboration with the city and Alan Lowe's team for the HVAC and indoor air quality grants. I'm sure you know all about it. And that also was a pretty substantial amount. I think it was something upwards of $35 million. So that's the one that is outstanding right now. We tend to go after all grants, and many of them are small. So we highlighted the $15 million one because that's a substantial grant and it's immense. Some of them are, we will go after a grant for $20,000 for, SEL or social emotional learning, or for a tutoring program. So we have many of those smaller ones also that we go after, but nothing right now that I would see would have a substantial impact on next year. But of course, we wouldn't know now what grants would be released in the fall. But again, you can't put staff that you have into a grant. So it would really be an enhancement like a science program or an art program. So they typically have a lot of those rules around the grants because they don't want you to create dependency on the grant. They would want you to start the program and then assume the cost of that program in your operating budget. And many of them do have that as a caveat that you have to sign off that you will continue whatever that program is in your operating budget, and you have to have a plan for that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Ed, we did, on the grant note, we did get a grant that impacted our capital budget request. In our capital budget request, we did have an item for our information technology. we received 895,000 after we had submitted our capital budget request from Digital Promise. So we were able to lower our capital budget request by 895,000. And then we also received a Verizon grant that funded our coaches. So that was about 250,000. And so we got word of that before we submitted the budget, but we were able to allocate personnel and not fully fund them in the local budget because this grant would fund personnel specifically related to that program. And so we have been able to offset some of these revenues and help obviously with the capital. It's debt service that is operating budget. So indirectly, it does have an impact, and we have applied.
Thank you.
to
Thank you.
Luna, how are we doing with the education cost sharing grant that we get from the state? I see on my book on page 53, It looks like it's pretty static the last 2 years. Is that the case, or are we getting more from the state?
No, it has been pretty static at that level, and ECS is, of all the grants that we have, ECS is the unique one in that grant actually goes to the cities and towns and not to the boards of education. And the portion that boards of education get is that 2%. So there's like a 2% redistribution after the initial allotment has made, and it looks at wealth and appraisal. But the portion that comes directly to the Board of Ed has remained fairly flat, as you can see in this chart.
Okay, I'm surprised at that. Okay.
Thank you.
No, that's one actually we've been following up on, and we've actually even been in touch with Bob Duff and others. And Sandra can speak more to it in terms of our efforts to get a greater share, not only of ECS, but other state statutory grants.
Well, I think you've said it all, which is we've been asking.
Yep. Okay.
Ed, I have a question.
Keep moving. Go ahead, Artie.
Artie, hi. Hey, sorry, this is on the previous slide. You have on professional technical services, I think here it's 3.8 million, and then you have other services, it's 7 million. Can you explain those numbers? I mean, that's a lot of money for other.
Yes. And part of it, okay, so which slide you're looking at? The
previous one.
This one.
There you go, right here.
This slide, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
you have 7.5 million
yes.
for other. What is other?
Sure. That's a good question,
kind of
actually.
That's a big number.
No, it is a big number. In the budget book, we actually provide a definition of what these are.
Okay.
Board of Ed chart of accounts are actually determined by the state. So all Board of Ed use the same chart of accounts. What is included in other services, which is the 500 series, these are services that are personnel, but not district payroll, separate from professional services. So other services would include things like our out-of-district tuition for our special education. That's considered an other service, but that's the category that the state gives us in terms of where to book it. So those are things that are included. If you look at your
tell me what page it is. I'll go find it.
Yeah, let me turn you to that page. If you look to page 42, if you look at page 42 of your budget book, and you see other services, there is a description of what's included in other services: student transportation, liability insurance, communication, advertising, and so forth. So those are the categories that make up other services.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's essentially what the grants cover, and then we also have the school lunch fund, which takes care of our school lunch program. And again, I'll toss it back to Deputy Feos to talk about the school lunch program, and then I believe it was Troy who had the question about the community eligibility program, and Ms. Feos can speak to that as well.
Sure. Do you want me to do that here or during the slide where we're doing the ask?
We could do it here, Sandra, I think.
Well, this slide is really explaining the school lunch fund without the CEP, correct, Lunda?
Correct.
Yeah.
Or maybe we could wait for that slide. I see your point.
Yeah, you understand. So you could,
I
so
do.
then, yeah, exactly. Mhm.
Okay.
So this is, you want to talk about the USDA?
Yeah, I'll just talk about, so what happens is we have federal dollars that come in that support the school lunch program. And so what's included in here, as you can see, there's some salaries and benefits for those that work in our cafeterias, which is accounts for a major part. The professional technical services, this is mainly our contract with our vendor that we use to provide our school services. And so that is primarily what is the professional technical services. And then we have some properties, anything that we do within the cafeterias that can be charged to the school lunch account. We charge, again, because this is a grant, it is also, again, restricted in what we can charge things for. They have to be specifically related to the school lunch program. And then supplies and materials, these again are supplies and materials that are relating to running of the school lunch fund. But essentially, it's about a $7 million program. We were fortunate during, well, not fortunate, but during COVID, the federal government provided free and reduced, provided grants so that we could feed everyone throughout the year. So for a period of 2 years, we were able to receive federal dollars, and we were actually able to build some surpluses in these funds through those grant dollars. And so we were able to fund this program with that. And then over time, obviously, those funds are depleting, just as are all the other grant funds. So that's kind of an overview of the school lunch fund. But Ms. Farias will talk about the community program because it is one of our budget drivers that we will get to. So Ed, this was, again, one of the questions that you had pulled the board is, what is our plan to balance our budget if we do not get the full ask? And so this is an example, a recap of what we did last year. So last year we came with that ask, as you could see, and then we ended up with that 4%. And we didn't have we have to balance the budget, obviously, in accordance with the state law. So last year, what we were able to do is we received some additional grants of about 1.6 million. We had, from the prior year, because the boards are allowed to carry over some funds, we anticipated being able to draw down about 3 million, which was pretty much all that we had left in that fund for the following year. And then towards the end of the budget process, you recall the mayor did provide a one-time 2.5 million allocation from the ARPA funds that the city had received. And then that still left a gap of about 11.8 million. And so what we did with 11.8 million, you recall that last year, we went through a list of all of our positions that were vacant last year, and we were able to defund almost 100 vacant positions. Now, the challenge with that, obviously, is some of these positions were needed in the schools, but at the time they were vacant, they weren't filled, and so we were able to do that. We delayed some purchases of equipment last year, and I'm trying to remember what else did we do. We delayed purchases of equipment, and then when there were some items that we were able to charge to grants, we did without obviously violating the supplanting rules. But that's essentially how we balance the budget, and that would be the similar process. When we get to the end of this process, these decisions obviously are not made independently. It is the Board of Education that sits together and does the work to get us to balance the budget. But that is essentially the plan for us in terms of what would we do if we don't get the full ask, which is consistent with what we've done in prior years.
Okay. Understanding that it is with the Board of Education and it is a working area, would you expect, Linda, that you'd take the same approach on open positions and things like that to as a roadmap again for FY 24-25?
Try. You did have a question on positions, which I think will address that, because some of the positions are mandated, like we talk about special education. So some of those open, we may not have as many open positions as we did last year because some of those have had to be filled because of individual. But yes, we would definitely look at that. We would look at we would take similar approaches. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I think this leads to the next question that you had regarding staffing and how is staffing distributed within the district. So this is looking at our general fund. And I think this is a slide you've seen. About 84% of our general fund budget is salaries and benefits. And then we have other services, supplies and materials, which make up about the remaining 15%. But for the most part, we are a people business, and that's where most of our expenses are. So any reduction that we have to make will inevitably have to impact this piece of the pie. In terms of where are our positions distributed, this is a chart that's also in what information you have. We took our total position counts that are in our current budget, our FTEs. Our budget currently, the request has 1,700 positions that are locally funded and about 190 positions that are grant funded. This is where those positions live. Elementary, high school, and middle school, obviously being the largest places of work, employ the majority of our workforce. Facilities and transportation is another area. These are people that keep our buildings clean, transport our children, and run the transportation services. And then instructional support are folks that work with our educators in the schools to provide them support. And then you have other central office type functions, finance and human resources. Digital learning is our information technology, our IT department, but there's also a teaching component where we have folks in the schools that work directly with schools and students who are part of the digital learning team. So digital learning is not entirely central office IT. And then we have other district support services, including communications. We have some data teams that work in there. Communications is separate. And then we have the superintendent. So if you look at these two slides, you'll see that 97% of the general fund positions are in the schools, facilities, and instructional support. That's where these bodies live. And if you look at the grant fund, it follows a similar distribution. 99% actually of our grant funded positions are either in schools, facilities, and instructional support. With the grant positions, we don't get to dictate where they are because it's driven by the grant and the grant requirement. And most of our grants are curriculum and teacher focused. And so that's where the funding comes from. I see a raised hand, so I'll stop for now to answer questions.
Yeah, this is Ann, Linda. How are you?
Good. How are you, Ann?
Thank you. How many teachers are there, certified state teachers of the total staff?
That is actually on the next slide, but I have that exact number for you.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Artie, before I get to my question.
Yeah, I noticed on your staffing sheet that you have, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Your central office staff is 170 on the head count. Is that correct?
What page are you looking at?
71 and 72.
Okay, let me see. Yes, that is also the next slide. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, it is.
Yes, but no, please
You want
ask
me to
your
wait?
question. No, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. So that does the correct number. Do you have the total cost for central office broken out?
It is on a future slide. Yes.
It is? Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then I will hold my question as well, because I was going to get to cost question related to the FTE. So.
Sure. Now, I will say that, for example, and I don't know, Artie, which numbers you're adding up to get to the 170. Our curriculum and instruction is an example that provide teaching support. Their offices, they're not in the school buildings.
Yeah, that's
they're
why I asked
in
if my
City
number.
Hall.
Yeah, that's
Was
why I
that-
asked if I'm correct. That's why I
Yeah,
said I may be
so
wrong.
if you're including
Yeah.
that team, they don't have, because they support multiple schools, so
Yep.
they don't sit at one school. So you'll have somebody that provides, English language arts oversight
Absolutely.
for all the district, but they sit in central office and not at the schools.
Yeah,
And I
thank you.
think it's the same for like school nurses. Like, so there
Right.
are some that end up being central office, but they're not located at central office. They're located at schools, but they're labeled central office.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think we do a better job with that explanation in the following slides.
Okay.
So Artie, the slides that you were referring to, the pages on page, they begin on page 67 of the budget book, and they go through page 72, is a listing of all of these positions that we have and where they live. The slide that I include here is just a summary of those 5 pages. But if you go to those pages, it basically blows out this slide. And so, Anne, you were asking how many certified teachers we have in the district. So line 117 is the teacher line. So we have 1,080 certified teachers that we have proposed for this budget. 994 of whom are locally funded and 85 of whom are grant funded. Ed, you said you were holding your question until this slide. Do you or
No, I believe you said in a couple slides you would get to the dollar figures associated with these numbers.
So this slide basically talks about our FTE positions by the major categories, by the major groupings. And so you'll see that year over year, there are in this budget 41 positions, about 41.9 positions. I'll start from the top. I sorted it by high to low. So you'll see that I talked about paraeducators, which are mandated that provide support to our students in the classroom. And so depending on the needs within the classroom, number of students in the classroom, it triggers the contract to bring in a paraeducator to serve that child. And so that number fluctuates from year over year. But just for this year, we have had to increase 24.5 paraeducator positions to support directly the students in the classes. And then you'll see that this year, just based on enrollment, we added 5.4 educators and so forth. But you could see that that is really what's driving the increase year over year. We were talking about the Magnet School Assistance Program. We separated that out because it is a unique program. And so that program for this year will fund 8 positions, which are the 3 administrators. We have 3 schools that are receiving that grant. So each school has a school supervisor. And then we have recruiters that related to recruiting students, a program director, and a secretary to manage the fund. But this chart kind of shows a summary of the year over year increases, but there's also the pages from page 67 to 70 has this detail broken down at a even more granular level for you to see. So on the staffing, one of the things that obviously is a big driver when you have a system of this size are our insurance costs. And therefore, you'll recall that last year, our members of the teachers union left the state partnership 2.0 plan, which is what the city and the rest of the board is on, to a high deductible plan. So this budget actually accounts for those 2 different plans. So as far as the state partnership plan, it's been a great plan. When the city and the board transitioned together, it did do a decent job of stabilizing costs during the past 6 years I've been on. This budget currently budgets, we've heard about a 7% increase. We will be getting final numbers before we approve the budget. And so we will make appropriate adjustment, which goes back to your question, Ed, what do we do with balancing the numbers? So if we get revised numbers, we'll revise downwards. In addition to the district fully paying for health insurance, we do have an employee share. And in our contracts, each year, we do a slight increase of the employees' contribution to the plan, which reduces the districts. So this year, we have 8 unions, each has a different plan. But on average, the district is picking up 1% less of the employee insurance, and the employees are picking up a 1% more. And again, this is the same as the city plan. As far as the teachers union, they're on the Cigna high deductible plan. We are still waiting to get what that renewal rate is because they just started in September. We have been told that we should get their renewal rate in April because they don't have enough history. They've only been on there for five months or so. The contract that was signed had a maximum of 15% not to exceed. That's what we've included in here. We are hoping that that number comes down. I think when we did the calculation, each percent decrease from what we've budgeted is about $150,000 or so. So we're hopeful that when it does come back with a percent reduction, each percent would save us about another $150,000 or so downwards. And then again, with the teachers union, they had a 0.5% share increase for the employee contributions. And I think I went too far. Okay, so now we're in the general fund, which is a portion of the budget that's supported by property taxes. And so looking at salaries and benefits, again, this kind of ties with the chart I showed before, where salaries and benefits account for about 85% of the overall budget. Professional technical services and all the others kind of fall below it. Ed, one of your questions that you had posed was, what are the additional expenses that the city pays for that are not captured in this general fund, in the general fund support? And so each year there is an education filing system, EFS, where all districts are supposed to compile some of this information, and we send that over to show how much additional funding the city provides. So last year, our last submission was 7.6 million. And so that cuts across fiscal services, for example, your finance department apportioned some of their time to this budget process because we're a component unit, the law department and so forth. So between fiscal services, there's some legal services that the cities across the state provide to boards of ed. There's some police protection that the city provides to our schools. There's some protection that we pay for at the schools for extra duty, but there's some protection that is provided to the schools by our police department. Repairs and maintenance, there's some public works, health and welfare services, and others, but they amounted to about 7.6 million in kind. They're referred to as in kind support for the district that you provide. Now, essentially, if these services were not provided to the district, these resources will be redirected somewhere else. They will basically provide those services to the city side. They wouldn't necessarily go away. But I hope I answered that question.
Hi, this is Kendrick. I have
Oh,
a
go ahead,
question.
Kendrick.
Yeah, I have a question about the services, the police services that
Yes.
are provided. You said you pay for a portion of that. Do you know the number?
Yes, I believe we pay approximately 250,000. And so this is like police, $250,000 a year.
And that's
So this is like,
security, that's overtime.
yeah, so this would be, for example, if we have an after-school event, if we have sports events where we have police that come to our facilities and provide protection. So we pay for those services. We're billed for those services over and above the regular patrol of our facilities. And Ms. Fayos, you can chime in on that. I see you're nodding your head in agreement.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
for things like graduation, traffic control, anytime we have like large crowds where we need additional, there's certain ordinances where, you know, if you are having a very large crowd that you have an EMT on site and you have police. So those types of events, it's
Right.
what we pay for. Mhm.
So those we
right.
do
So-
pay for and we are billed for.
So in the fourth quarter, the chief of police had made a request from contingency for about 500K for overtime that was back paid. So it seems as if the city's covering 2/3 of that cost. Do you think there's room to go down the middle per se versus the city covering the majority of those services?
So there's a couple of things. I mean, Ms. Ferris can chime in on it. Here in the past 2 years, I believe, and we are thankful to the mayor for this, following some of the Uvalde and some of these incidents that happened at the various schools, the mayor did provide additional security at our schools. And that was something that the district was not paying for, but this was something that the mayor felt was necessary to keep the community safe. And so this was an enhanced service that was provided to the schools that wasn't provided in years past. And so should we start paying for that? I think that's an excellent policy question. And it's worth a conversation, but I don't know if I have an answer for you, Kendrick, on that. But that is some history into the additional security presence in the schools.
No, definitely feel like it's necessary. It's just the breakdown of the cost. That's my
Correct.
concern.
Linda, on a larger level, and I don't want to
Yes.
derail the conversation because it's not germane to tonight, but can I ask you to please get with Tom Ellis on that $7.8 million number? I'm recalling from prior years' presentations and discussions where city-side in-kind funding reflected a number that was significantly higher than that, right? Almost in the $20 million range, if memory serves, right? And I just want to make sure we've got like for like in terms
Sure.
of what the in-kind is. Again, it's not germane to tonight, so let's just take it as a side action to
No, I
reconcile
think-
those numbers.
No, I think you're right. So the 7.8 million is the EFS. They are specific in what in the elements that you collect in terms of city's contribution. I think I recall seeing that presentation. That probably includes, like, for example, the debt service, the portion of the debt service that's attributed to school facilities. So the way that the state views that is different because, you know, all of our facilities are city facilities and we just use them. And so when the
Yep.
state collects their contributions, they don't count that as an indirect. But to your point, yes, if you include debt service that's paid, a portion that's at the city, you know, on a $40 million annual debt service, about half of that is related to Board of Ed. So I think that's the number that, but I do agree with you. Yes. So you're right.
Okay.
If you include debt service and that, then yes, it's the seven. It's a bigger number, but not the number that's reported to the state. But it's relevant anyway for this conversation. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
Luna, this is Troy again. Getting back to the
Yes.
school lunch fund, are you saying that all children in the school system get free lunch? I wasn't clear still on what you're saying there. Regardless of their ability to pay.
That is the next slide, but yes.
And is
And
that
Sandra
a
will go-
mandate? Is that a mandate, or is that the district's decision to do that?
Sandra, do you want to go
wanna
ahead and
the
jump?
ne- Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Do you
let's
wanna
just
go
get to that slide. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, it is true that all students currently receive meals that are for free regardless of their ability to pay. The reason being is that 2 years ago, when we were coming off of COVID and we had additional grant funding from the federal government that covered meals, even a little bit past the pandemic. So families had been eating for free. We had actually been providing meals even through the pandemic for families to be able to pick up. And so then students taking breakfast and taking lunch had increased significantly. When we were coming off of the pandemic 2 years ago, we were presented with the opportunity to apply for something called the Community Eligibility Provision. That CEP is what we refer to it, is a program that once you hit a certain poverty threshold as a community or as a district, you can actually apply to have everybody eat for free. And there is the program pays for a portion of it. through a reimbursement rate. And then the district puts in the other portion. Now, I presented this to the board 2 years ago before we moved forward, because prior to COVID, we used to actually have nearly $1 million in debt in our school lunch fund. The reason being, it's because people would eat, families would run a debt, and then we would be unable to collect that debt. Prior to that, what we used to do is if students had a debt, the school would stop serving them lunch, and instead they would get a cheese sandwich. A few administrations ago, they did away with that practice of having students come up, and once they came up with their lunch, that the person would say, you can't have lunch, and here's a cheese sandwich. They actually call it food shaming, and it was something that other districts did away with. Once we did away with food shaming, families would accumulate a greater debt. And so we would not be able to actually recoup those funds. So much so that we ended up in about $1 million in debt at the district level. So this community eligibility program, when we did the math, it actually, the money that we would have to contribute as a district would be the same amount as the money that we had been contributing in the debt. And so
And
then
that deficit looks like on your little booklet here, $1.3 million due to the lower, is that the correct? Was that the amount, that the shortfall in that CEP plan?
Correct.
All right, and, okay, I understand what you're saying, but okay, I mean, 40% of the population can pay the debt. Okay, I mean, if that's a decision you guys made, that's a decision you made, but.
Well,
I think
I think we also.
I'm sorry, can I finish? 40% of them do not qualify for SNAP. It doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't have had a reduced lunch.
Right.
So there is a portion of our student demographic that actually can pay because of we know the demographics of Norwalk, and we know that some families can, but there's a larger portion of our families that couldn't.
Okay,
Troy,
thank you.
and sure. And then to add to that, I mentioned earlier that we were able to receive.
I don't know if
the
Dr.
800
Estrella was trying to speak, Lunda. I don't know if I heard somebody.
I didn't see.
You addressed what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Estrella.
So I think the other piece of that too, I mentioned the 895,000 grant that we received. The district received that grant because we were a CEP grant. So had we not been a CEP grant, we would not have been eligible to receive the almost $1 million grant. So there's some intrinsic, and I understand where you're going, Troy, just to kind of the logic behind one or the other, but it's our CEP status that made us eligible to receive an $895,000 grant.
Yeah.
That in the past we were not able to receive because we weren't a CEP.
It allows us to actually pursue other opportunities for funding because it shows that now district-wide, we are a free and reduced lunch district.
Got it.
I get it.
Okay. All right. Linda, if you're going to get to this still, please let me know. But one of the things I would like to understand back to the salary and benefits numbers, which represent about 77% of your budget, is how do those numbers break out by the FTE categorizations you showed 3 or 4 pages back? Understanding how much of that salary money is actually going directly to teaching and student impact versus administration is something that I think it'd be very helpful to understand.
Sure.
And if you're going to get to that, I will wait.
It's literally my next slide. So you're right on it. I think you have a copy of my slide deck, Ed.
No, not yet. Anyway.
So that's the next slide. But before I get to that, there was one other question that you did ask. You asked a question about legal counsel over at the district, and I wanted to be able to address that as well. I think part of the confusion is We had approved a person at the board, as we take all senior members of staff before board approval. An individual was hired into that role. And then immediately after, there was a common council meeting, and I believe somebody left our meeting, went to the common council meeting and said, the board just hired another legal counsel. But that is a position that we've actually had in the district for quite some time. What this role does is they deal with grievance and labor proceedings, administrative matters and hearings that are separate from what Jeff Spar does. When we have internal staff investigations, misconducts type of issues, this is something that this individual does internally. They are responsible for FOIA requests, and they also provide training, Title IX, sexual harassment, so they provide in-house training for these individuals. I went clear back to 2017. We had a gentleman named Anthony Shannon was in that role. We had a gentleman called Chris Sugar that was in that role. Barbara Namani was in that role. Most recently, Louis Bray was hired into that role. He then became director of HR, and this person replaced Louis Bray. But this is a position that the district has had as far back as 2015, 14, I believe, and even before. That's as far back as I could go. So it's not a new position or position that has not existed in the district. And they do work with Jeff Spar and legal counsel. We are actually fortunate this year, maybe that'd be part of the confusion, in that this year we actually have an HR director who is also an attorney. And so we now have two legal individuals working in two roles, whereas in the past, only one of those individuals would have been an attorney. So now we have two attorneys, but one is also the HR director and the other is a legal counsel. So it's not a new position. It's a position that we've had for quite some time.
Thank you, that helps.
Sure, you're welcome. So now let me get to the slide that you're referring to. So I put together this for you, and it's not in the handouts that you have because this was at your request. So the first slide that I showed you were the distribution of staff by head count, right? And where they live. And so what I did, I took that same information and applied salaries and benefits and all others. And so when we look at our schools, primarily we have high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, facility and operations, transportation services, and instructional support. These are what we would categorize areas that provide direct as direct services to our schools. So in looking at this slide, let me see, things are on my. So if you look at this slide, you'll see that over time, and I'll talk about the budget that's approved, the 2024 budget, you'll see that high schools account for 22.9% of our total budget, middle schools 18.8%, elementary schools, obviously we have more schools, 37%, and so forth. So if you add all of these percentages up, you get that 97% of salaries and all budgets are tied to our schools. The next slide shows these, what we refer to non-direct schools. So you have the Board of Education, the Superintendent's Office and staff, HR and Finance. Within HR and Finance, we do have some district-wide items. So it's not just HR and Finance, like all of our retirements, our Social Security payments are budgeted out of here. And then you have a component of the digital learning that's not in the schools, and then operations and communications. And so these make up about 5% in this year, but anywhere between, in the last couple of years, 8 to 4% district-wide. This final slide is basically summarizing those different buckets I just shared. So if you look at over time, in terms of district support in 2021, actual, it was 183 million, which is about 89%. And then those non-support were about 10.4 for a total general fund of 204 million. And then over time, you can kind of see, and I apologize, that 23-24 and 24-25 are actually budget, not actuals. So I'll update that slide, but you can see where we are. The gray item at the bottom is looking at this history over time. And I just did a cumulative annual growth, the CAGR. So district support services over time have increased about 6.1%. The district-wide support services over time have actually been going down by basing on those categories that I used. And the general fund cumulative annual growth in that time period has grown up about 4.6% general funding. So you could kind of see of the 4.6%, a substantial, the investment is in the district-wide support based on those buckets that I put together. I don't know, Ed, if this answers that question or if you needed to be more granular than this. We could definitely put things together and send your way.
It certainly answers it at the macro level. I would ask
Sure.
if any other members of the BET have question on this. Anne, your hand's raised.
Yes, I guess I would be curious to see a breakout on the direct student reports in terms of teachers, actual teachers, but then how the supervisory staff and instructional assistants are play into that mix.
So would position titles help? Would that, if we put that for you, would that answer your question?
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we can put that together. We can put it by, let's see. Yeah, we could put it by category of positions. We could.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. That part was very helpful. Appreciate it. And the additional
Sure.
detail will be helpful as well.
Yes, we can provide that. And again, that really is the end of my presentation. I didn't intend to take this long. But for additional information, we do again have a website that will update with this information and all other information and presentations that we've made on the budget. It's available for the public, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and that my fellow team members are here as well, that you may still have that haven't been answered through the course of this presentation.
Let me turn it to the other BET members to see if they have any other questions that they want to raise at this point.
I just have one quick. Tom, can you just check into what Luda was saying about the ECS funds, please? What the city's getting. He said you guys get it and you distribute it to the board. Can we just look at, can I see the last couple of years on that, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anne?
Okay, so we spend about $24,000 per student. How does that compare to other comparable school districts in our area?
I can get that for you. I don't have it on top of my head, what
Okay.
other per pupil amounts are.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments for Linda or the team? Okay. Again, thank you, and thank you for the follow-ups that you've already agreed to take. Greatly appreciate those. I'll reiterate what we've all known and what we've all said. This is an extremely challenging budget year. There's no question that as we look at the future of the city of Norwalk, it is highly dependent on the success of our young people in our education system. We fully recognize that. We also, however, recognize that this is an exceptional year in terms of the tax burden that we are asking the citizens of Norwalk to bear. And we're going to have to balance those two things, and it's going to require compromise on all sides. I know you know that. I know you are committed to working with the mayor and with Tom and the city to get us there. Our job as a BET is to simply ensure that as we look at the total expense and how it's distributed, it's fair and equitable and it's reasonable for our taxpayers. So just using all that to say that while I fully understand the $245 million request and the 8.2% increase, I think we all realize that we're going to have to find ways to compromise off those numbers to balance both the needs of our future and our citizens today. And I know that we're all committed to doing that work together. We will go through our deliberations and we'll come back with our recommendations and we will then together work from there. That's, very helpful understanding everything tonight, but I just want to set the expectation on the fact that we will, working with yourselves, working with the mayor, working with everyone, need to find a compromise position.
And Ed, may I say something?
Please, Dr. Estrada.
And I fully understand the predicament that the city is in and the points that you make. I just want to reinforce the fact that last year was a really difficult year for our public schools. We had experienced significant cuts that created significant strain in the work that we're trying to do. And I hope that you also take that into account as you think forward, because further reducing where we are now can put at risk the great work that we have accomplished thus far. And we really want to continue to elevate the work that we're doing as a city school system to ensure that, one, like I reiterated before, that our students are in the path to success, but that the city thrives, right? Great schools create great communities, and Norwalk is strong because of many things, but most importantly, our schools, because we are the backbone of Norwalk's future. So I just hope that although we know we have to make compromises, that we take into consideration the fundamental needs, and that we had some significant cuts last year, and we want to make sure we can do the work well.
Understood and appreciated. Truly, truly appreciate it. And it is something we will think about and work through closely together. It's not going to be fun for anybody on any side of this conversation, and I think we all know that. Again, you make valid points. We just have a very tough job of trying to balance the needs and wants of many as we go through this process. So thank you.
I jump in just for 1 second. I have an answer for you, Troy. Going back to on the ECS number, going back to 2019, it was a low of about 9.7 million. And as of 2024, it's 10.1 million. It's been pretty consistent over the last 5 years or so.
That's interesting. Okay.
Thank you, Tom. I was actually just going to point you to the audit book. That's where the number was, because I was looking for it at the same time you were looking for it.
Gotcha.
So yes, I think we're both saying the same thing.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at, Troy, is there are occasionally some commentary in the local press about Norwalk not getting their fair share when you look at what some of the other municipalities of our size.
Yeah, no, more than that. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Any other remarks from anybody before we close this evening?
And if I may, I just wanted to thank the BET. I think we've had a good conversation. We will work to get the answers to you. And I hope I was able to answer some of the questions that you sent over. And if there's any follow-up, please let us know. But we'll work to get the drill down information. I know you're meeting again on Monday to do your final deliberations, and we'll strive to get the information so you have all the information to make an informed decision. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other closing remarks? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn from somebody from the BET?
To adjourn.
From Artie, thank you very much. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your patience this evening, everyone. Have a nice night. The BET will reconvene again on Wednesday. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Wednesday or Monday?
Monday, and
Monday.
Monday, 6:30.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Did he say Wednesday?
Yeah, he did.
Okay. Bye, Artie. Bye, Tom.